Your favorite headline. Let's talk about Nigeria's debt under this administration. Because Nigerians have become very good at seeing a frightening number, attaching it to the government, and immediately drawing a political conclusion. 159 trillion naira, and suddenly everybody becomes an economist. But let me ask you, do you understand the numbers you are arguing about? Because a number can be absolutely correct, and the story being told about that number can still be completely wrong. Now let's go back to March 2023, shortly before this administration took over. Nigeria's public debt was 49.85 trillion naira, approximately $108.30 billion. And in March 2026, Nigeria's public debt was 159.35 trillion naira, approximately $114.95 billion. Now somebody looks at 49.85 trillion naira to 159.35 trillion naira and says, this government borrowed the entire difference of 109 trillion naira. Oh, please. Stop. Because that's not what those two numbers by themselves prove. And this is where you need understanding. In June 2023, shortly after this administration took over, Nigeria's public debt jumped to 87.38 trillion naira. And a major reason for this was the incorporation of 22.71 trillion naira in ways and means advances into the public debt stock. And the Debt Management Office of Nigeria, the DMO, acknowledged that the second quarter figures included the securitized ways and means. Now, what does this mean in plain English? Ways and means simply refer to money the federal government had obtained as short-term financing from the Central Bank of Nigeria under previous administrations. And this administration, via securitization, formally converted those existing obligations into public debt with a repayment structure. Why? Because you cannot owe money and expect the liability to disappear because you kept it in a different drawer. The obligation existed. It needed to be restructured. It needed to be recognized, and it needed to be repaid. That is debt management, not money appearing from somewhere because a new government arrived. Now let's deal with another elephant in the room, the exchange rate. A significant portion of Nigeria's public debt or Nigeria's external debt is denominated in foreign currency. So when Naira depreciates, the Naira obligation or the Naira value of the existing of those obligations rises. So you can owe significantly or little amounts in dollars and owe much more significantly in Naira. I mean, take a look at the numbers. In March 2023, our public debt in dollars was $108.30 billion. And in March 2026, our public debt was $114.95 billion. Can you see the difference? But now let's look at it in Naira. In March 2023, our public debt in Naira was 49.85 trillion Naira. And in March 2026, our public debt in Naira was 159.35 trillion Naira. So that right there is something you need to take note of. So when anyone just shouts, we're owing, this government has borrowed 109 trillion Naira, you need to know that you are just reading the story, calling the numbers, without really understanding the numbers. Now, here's another important and frequently asked question. Why does government borrow? Government earns revenue, taxes, oil and gas, customs, different fees, other receipts. But government still has obligations, though. And when what government plans to spend exceeds what it expects to collect, there's a budget deficit. For 2026, the projected revenue was 34.33 trillion naira. The projected expenditure was 58.18 trillion naira. The projected deficit was 23.85 trillion naira. And the projected debt service alone was 15.52 trillion naira. Now here's the lesson. Nigeria can have money and still not have enough money. Nigeria can have revenue and natural resources and still not have enough government revenue to meet all of government's obligations and expectations. You know why? Because resources are not revenue. Revenue is not expenditure. An expenditure above revenue creates a financing gap. That is the physical reality. So, should we be concerned about Nigeria's debt? Of course. Should government be accountable for what it borrows? Absolutely. But you don't just go around chanting, they are borrowing, they are borrowing. Because borrowing is not the revelation. What the money being borrowed is used for actually is. So by all means, go ahead and do your politics. But don't do politics with numbers you don't understand. Because you can be politically passionate and still be intellectually rigorous at the same time. In fact, you should. So read the numbers, understand the numbers, and then go ahead and do your politics. Remember that ignorance does not become intelligence simply because it was delivered with noise. Have a good evening.